Senator Thayn.
Thank you, Mr. President, to debate against the bill.
Senator has the floor.
I appreciate the senator from 32 and his explanation on what the bill contains and the purpose of the bill. You know, there's an argument to be said that a state exchange actually could be a vehicle to resist federal enlargements, blandishments. I would maintain that this is not the bill. Let me just ask a few questions that I hopefully will be answered in the course of the debate. The good senator from 32 touched on a couple, but not all of them. He mentioned that the cost to develop the exchange was probably about $30 million. At one time this summer it was $77 million and it dropped back to $20 million. Why I think that's important is the ongoing cost of maintaining the exchange.
Thank you. You're very
It would be nice to know what those fees would be. And I don't think that question has been answered. Also, in the purpose and intent of the bill, which parts of it I really do like on page 1, lines 18 through 20, it says it is the policy of the state of Idaho to actively resist federal actions that would limit or override state sovereignty under the 10th Amendment. So what federal actions are we contemplating overriding or resisting? And where in the bill can these be found? Likewise, on page 1, lines 21 through 23, through this legislation, the state of Idaho asserts its sovereignty by refusing to surrender decision-making authority over health issues, which are matters appropriately left to the states and individual citizens. Are we contemplating a nullification strategy here? If so, in what areas and what issues, and where in the bill can these be found? Because this bill gives direction to a health insurance exchange. And I don't see the direction being given to them by the legislature on how they're going to accomplish these lofty goals. Do we have a strategy to get out of the exchange if the federal government rules that we no longer agree with them, that changes the rules? And what rules would be changed to prompt us to take such an action? Then on that those same lines 21 through 23, where are these health care issues listed that should be left appropriately to the states and the individual citizens? I'm curious as to what we're talking about, because I don't see them listed, at least not in the bill, and I'd like to know where they are listed. On lines 24 through 25 of page 1, it says that Idaho will have a state-created, market-driven health exchange. I'm not even sure what this means. I'm not so sure the state creates market-driven anything, but it would be nice if someone could respond to that. Because in a free market, usually transactions are voluntary. And page 1, lines 28 through 23, it talks about no employer or citizen being required in this bill to purchase a health benefit through the exchange, which is good. But I'm wondering, when it talks about a level playing field, how level this is going to really be if within the exchange is the only place you can get the subsidy. Because the subsidy applies to those between 138% of poverty and 400% of poverty. And speaking of subsidies, I've tried to ask several people what the size of those subsidies might be. And the best I've been able to come up with from some research I've done in a book called Obamacare Survival Guide, Idaho could receive up to $225 million of subsidies. And my understanding is those subsidies goes to eventually end up in insurance companies to provide health care. So this is a fairly large amount of subsidies, but what if they go away in the future? Will Idaho be required to replace them? Are we building expectations that cannot be sustained? You know, we just had a meeting here with Senator Crapo and Representative Simpson, and they felt quite confident that sequestration was going to take place in a couple of weeks. What impact is that going to have on these funding streams? Some of these questions maybe no one can answer, but I'm concerned about creating a new entitlement when we really are not able to pay for the entitlements we currently have. So if we go to page 2, line 5, it speaks of the director, meaning the director of insurance or the Department of Insurance, and that it gives him a certain amount of, it defines who that director is. But I'm really curious as to how a director, if it isn't a conflict of interest for the director to be the one who regulates the insurance on these exchange. I'm a little concerned about that. It also says on page 2, lines 15 through 16, that the board is an independent board. Independent from what? Now, if we go back to the intent of this bill, the intent was to have a vehicle to maintain states' rights and states' decision-making. And in this document, it's the Idaho SBE blueprint that was sent to the federal government by Director Deal. In section 1.2, it lists the four things the exchange is going to do. One is to carry out, Mr. President, may I read?
Senator, having identified the source, may read.
One is to carry out the required functions of the exchange. Two is meet the information reporting requirements associated with premium tax credits. Three, serve the entire geographic area of the state. And four, which I think is important for the discussion of this bill, meet the standards for a state-based health exchange set by the U.S. Department of Health and Human Services exchange regulations as outlined in ACA 1311D and 45 CFR 155.110. It appears to me that the intent of the director in setting forth this blueprint was to comply with all the regulations in the law. So are we complying or are we resisting? If we're resisting, where are we resisting? And what's the mechanism to do that? On page 2, lines 23 through 24, the exchange shall operate subject to the supervision and control of the board. What is the role of the legislature in overseeing this board? As I read it, we don't really have any oversight. We've made an independent board. Here's another critical point in my mind. On page 2, lines 31 through 32, it says the majority of the board shall not collectively represent health carriers and producers. I think this is important because health carriers and producers operate, in my mind, in a cost-plus environment. They're not as interested in keeping costs down as if medical costs continue to go up, they just need a little bit more to run the organization. What I'm interested in seeing is that costs go down for the consumer. So you have actually 10 of the 14 members that I could see would be operating with this mentality. And I'm not sure how we're going to provide good medical care to the state of Idaho when you have a majority of the board that operates under a cost-plus philosophy. It's not how I would make up the board. And then on line 20, page 2, lines 33 and 34, it says the board shall serve at the pleasure of the governor, which is common. However, I feel really uneasy ceding this much authority to an independent board and to the governor. On page 3, line 38, it talks about all the powers of the board. They have all the powers to perform duties that are necessary and proper. Now, I don't want to get too paranoid or anything, but this sounds a lot like the necessary and proper clause of the U.S. Constitution that has been expanded. What are the limitations on necessary and proper to fulfill their duties? And then I'm wondering why the bylaws are not subject to legislative oversight. At least it seems like they're not to me. So, Mr. President, what I see in this bill is a lot of promises, a lot of things that I would like to believe. In fact, I could even understand an argument that a state exchange could do what the intent of this bill says it could do. I am not convinced in the body of this bill that any of those intents are able to be fulfilled, and I would urge you to vote against this bill. Thank you, Mr. President.